Slurpty Derp, volume 3964. Today I've got a video for you, so that's exciting, isn't it? Videos, audio and visual. It's the new world that we live in, isn't it? It's the metaverse, it's the Web 3, Web 3.0. Let's get into it. Artifact tutorial. How you doing? So I had a request in my Discord group to do a couple of tutorials, and I was asking, what would be the most helpful tutorial that I could do like on YouTube. A lot of people requesting like mastering tutorials. Not sure if I'm comfortable doing that on YouTube because I think that's like more of a paid thing. I haven't actually taught mastering before, but I will probably try to get into it. I'm not sure how to go about it yet anyway, but let's move on. The other thing is how to transition between 16 bar loops and how to go from a 16 bar loop over to like another 16 bar loop. And I've got a few tips, like two main ones that I think, things that I'm always really conscious of, because there's two F's in of, when I do my like transitions. And maybe I do it a little bit differently because I like to, mess with the listener a lot and like change things up quite quickly after the first 16 in my tracks, because I tend to get bored easily otherwise. But I've got this track here called Shakuhachi, which you may remember, and I'm just going to use this as like sort of reference point to explain some things. So if I just fast forward and like we'll just take a listen to the first 16 bars like from the drop, and then I'm going to talk about like my main kind of tips on things you can do to transition between your loops. So there we're rolling into the third 16 already. But if you were paying close enough attention to the energy of the loops, so that's the first thing that I would recommend you think about, like from the most broad, most macro perspective of the change in your 16 bar loop should be a significant change in energy. And you can go both ways. So let's say you got your first 16 bar drop, pretty nice high energy, for example. Second 16, you either want to ramp up the energy, almost like a switch where it just gets really more, like really more energetic on the second 16, or you want to dip down the energy and like, chill things out a little bit. And then perhaps for the third 16, you can reintroduce and re-amplify like some of the overall feeling of energy. And so that's what I've done in this one. If you noticed, the energy kind of drops a little bit on the second 16. So if I just sort of scroll back, it sort of happens just before here. A little bit before. It's a little bit more, it becomes a little bit more melodical, a little bit more tamed, melodical. But generally, overall, the energy is less, okay? So first thing to figure out when you're transitioning from one 16 bar loop to the next 16 bar loop is, do you want to have an increase in energy or do you want to have a decrease? And there's no right or wrong, and you can make both cool. For example, in this one, the third 16 gets like super high energy. So it kind of, starts big, dips down a bit and then goes big again. So, but that shifting and changing in energy as an overall feeling is what drives the narrative and keeps the song interesting, because any 16 bar loop on its own out of context is just boring by default. By nature, it's not been contextualized in the story of a song. It's like watching like a scene from a film like just halfway through and then like turning the TV off, and it's like, okay, cool, what happened though, you know? So think about it as a storyline and the changes in energy, but you can go both ways always. No right or wrong there. The second thing to think about when changing your loops, like things, something that could really help you like decide what to do is in each song we usually prioritize the mid-range for one particular element or sound, or yeah, you know. So in this case, it's kind of like the bass, my mid bass in the first 16 is like the priority. So if you kind of listen back a bit. Yeah, that's the sound I made in Vital using my shakuhachi flute, which is somewhere. I won't get it out now, but I want to get it out and show off my Japanese flute because it's really cool, but I'm not going to. Okay. Will I? No, I'm not going to. I prioritize that mid bass. It's the main sound. Obviously, there's other little fills and things happening around it, but it's the star of the show. And it's the star of the show, therefore it contains all of the mid-range frequencies. They're all being, you know, everything sort of comes around that. I'm terrible at explaining, sorry. That bass, it occupies all of the mid-range for the majority of the time, and maybe things are sort of sidechained to it, or things are dipping in and out around it. But primarily, the mid-range, which is like the main focal point of the song, is that bass is dominating that area. And so when it comes to your second 16-bar loop, or when you're changing your loop, one of the best things that you can do is to decide to give a different sound or a different instrument priority in the mid-range, because your ears, as humans, like we tend to compartmentalize each sort of sound, and we do have like sort of one sound that's the main, you know, driving force, which is the mid-range sound, right? So you can change that up, so you can make a different element or part of your track into that like main focal mid-range sound now for your second 16. So in this case, I bring in this like kind of lead dim 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 arpeggiated synth thingy majiggy. You know, and if you heard just before it comes in, I introduce it with a like kind of reverbed delayed effect. So it goes dum 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 dum. So this little like introduction effect just before is what helps with the transition here. Well, I timed that just right. What a legend I am. I'm such a legend. Self-esteem, self-love. That's what it's all about. Yes. What was I saying? I keep forgetting what I'm doing halfway through these videos. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we're changing up the mid-range. You know, now I'm prioritizing that synth. That's like kind of slowing the track down a bit. It's not this like forward thinking like massive bass anymore. It's more of this like kind of melodic chugging along kind of rhythm, you know, and that's like slowing down the energy of the track. And of course there's like other basses around it still. There's other like low mid-range basses sort of hovering, that would be above, lurking underneath it still. But like that main mid-range area, sort of 500 hertz or whatever, is sort of being more dominated by that lead now. So that's how I've achieved, you know, the switching up and the changing of the energy is through changing the main element, which is the focal point in each 16, you know, and all the other sounds, your other drums, your other leads, your other fills, your other effects, they all kind of work around it still, you know. But this is the best way that I've thought of to explain it from a more like, yeah, broader perspective, or more perhaps more useful and simplified like kind of mindset to think about with your 16-bar loops is, number one, the energy. Is it going to go up or down for the next one? Number two, the main focal mid-range sound. Is it going to be, well, it should be different. So what are you going to use next? For example, like if you had a vocal, you know, maybe you're bringing it, you're like having a vocal intro. you go into the drop, then you cut off the vocal, you prioritize the mid-range, of the bass. You've got a really fat, juicy bass, and you're letting it ride through all of the mid-range frequencies, and it's just, everyone's loving it, everyone's having a great time. Second 16 comes, you filter that bass off a bit, so you still got that low kind of lurking along, giving us a bit of sort of like underlying bass, but in the mid-range you've kind of filtered out those frequencies, and you bring back in that vocal, and you can sidechain the bass a little bit, so the vocal really, really cuts through in the mid-range, and you start to prioritize that vocal at like 500 hertz. So that becomes like your main sound in that second 16. So those are like the two main things to think about when like transitioning your 16 bar loops: higher or lower energy feeling overall, and then what's the new mid-range dominating sound. And yeah, I think it's best, in my opinion, when you have a new sound that comes in, like that lead, wasn't heard before. Because especially the first two 16s of a song, the first one is the impact and the drop, and everyone's like looking forward to that. But then like when you get to the second 16, you can start to lose people's interest pretty quickly. So that's why I like to have my second 16, introduce a whole new sound, a whole new world, a whole new drum and bass sound. Do you think I should quit and just become a singer? Probably. Yeah. Basically, introduce a whole new sound. A whole new sound. And people are just going to love you. They're going to love you so much more for doing it. There's some cases where you have like a roller track, and you kind of want to just keep it going for longer. So that it really does depend. But for me, when I'm writing music, I like to try and captivate the listener's interest, especially the TikTok generation interest. You got to be a bit quicker with like your changes and energy, I find. So that's why I like to have a whole new sound in like the second 16. And yeah, we kind of like go back to the those are like my main two top tips already, the energy and the main mid-range sound. But then the final thing I would just brush upon, that's like the more little details. So then once you've sort of figured out those two main parts, then the other like background stuff that you can change, like definitely you want to be doing that as well. So I'll always try to have one change in the drums, definitely. I might drop out a percussion layer or introduce a percussion layer if I wanted more energy. You can hear in this track, because I'm like dipping down the energy, I actually take away some of the like drum percussions or cymbals. Like it kind of sounds a bit slower, like the kind of faster 16th or 8th note kind of rhythm hats have sort of ducked away, and now I've got like a more minimal stripped back beat. And so yeah, that's because I'm decreasing the energy. And it's the change in energy that's important. It's not so important that you have to make it more energy for the second 16. Having it less energy, it creates that contrast and that change, and that's that contrast and that change which is important, not so much which way you're going. So yeah, in this case, I actually dip stuff away. But often, if I'm writing a song, the first 16 be like quite nice and heavy, and then the second 16 I want to get like even more powerful, more heavy. Then I'll introduce like a fast shaker or something in the background of the drums, so we have more energy. The important thing is that something in the background must change, especially in the drums. They will start to get a little bit repetitive and boring if you keep having the same layers in them. So take some away or introduce some. Up to you, really. You could like increase your hat rhythms and speed, or decrease them. That's one like simple way you could change your drums. Introduce a shaker, delete a shaker, introduce a ride, kind of background washy ride loop, delete that. But like that kind of, also change in the drums between your two 16s can really help with like the flow of the track, and it can help you with the changing of the energy. So you can use the different layers of the drums to create that feeling of higher or lower energy. And as I get to my third 16, this song, it gets really, really hectic, but but because I dipped down that second 16 and like made it a bit more rolling along, I have more impact and it's more exciting in that third 16 when I really ramp up the energy, and I just introduced, like, I use the same sounds as before. I sort of bring back in that main mid bass from the first part, so it sort of signifies that we're going back into like a real like low powerful mid bass being the driving force, and then I introduce some more like sort of faster versions and faster like kind of rhythms of the same sounds I had in the first section, but it's just sort of done at a quicker pace. So just increasing the energy by increasing the pace of the rhythms in that case. So that's like the 3 16 bar loops then are all like very, very different to each other. So I hope I've explained that quite well, and I hope it might have helped some of you out with like deciding on what to do with the different 16s. And yeah, as a final like summary then, I would say, having these little changes in the background always helps, and they're the things, the little changes in the drums or the little changes in like the background atmospheres or synths or the secondary sounds in your song. They can really participate into giving you the extra feeling of energy or dipping down the energy. Like, they're the ones that can be responsible for that. But then you got to decide, are you actually going up in energy or down in energy for the next 16? And what's your main focal mid-range sound for that section? And you got to prioritize that. And by switching it up and having a new sound come in on your second 16, or a new sound being prioritized, it could have been already in your first 16, but now you like bring out all of that mid-range that you'd previously left out. But what are you focusing the mid-range on in that new 16? By changing that's going to allow your song to have much more interest to the average listener, in my opinion. So I hope that's been a helpful video for you guys today. And as always, much love to you guys, but please don't do anything that I wouldn't, for goodness sake.